This boxer was so difficult to hit, he won his first world title by his opponent quitting out of utter frustration in between rounds. Ray Arcel, the legendary boxing coach of Roberto Duran and Larry Holmes, called him the greatest defensive boxer he had ever seen. His reflexes were so sharp, he could stand inches from his opponents with his hands down, dodging punches like he was in the Matrix before the movie even existed. All of this despite having zero punching power, hardly training, and reportedly smoking up to 50 cigarettes a day. How was this fighter able to amass a record that saw him gather 117 wins and 6 world title fight victories over nearly 20 years? Meet Nicolino Locche, the boxing disappearing act who made a career out of the notion that you can't beat what you can't hit. Born on September 2, 1939, in Duran, Argentina, Locche was the son of Italian immigrants who fled their homeland to escape the looming shadow of World War II. Little did they know their son would grow up to become one of the most perplexing puzzles in the boxing world. Picture a 9-year-old boy squaring off against bigger opponents under the flickering light of oil lamps. That was Locche's introduction to the sweet science. But what started as street fights soon evolved into something much more refined. At the age of 12, young Nicolino picked up a habit that would stick with him throughout his boxing career: smoking. Our future boxing maestro was puffing away before he even hit his teens. But don't let that fool you. As an amateur, Locche racked up an impressive 122 wins against just 5 losses. However, his way of achieving these wins is what perplexed people the most. Locche's method of boxing was much more unusual than the average fighter. Imagine a boxer who stands right in front of his opponent, hands down, practically inviting punches. Most fighters would be out cold by round 1. However, Locche wasn't most fighters. This Argentinian marvel had reflexes that would make a cat jealous. Locche's style was a complete departure from conventional boxing wisdom. He didn't rely on power punches or constant movement. Instead, he perfected the art of not getting hit. With uncanny head movement, subtle leans, and precise parries, Locche made his opponents look like they were swinging at shadows. But Locche wasn't just avoiding punches. He was gaming the system. In an era where boxing was scored on points, Locche would pepper his bewildered opponents with light jabs. Nothing devastating, but enough to rack up the points while making his opponents look foolish. Now, if Locche's in-ring antics weren't unconventional enough, his training habits would make any modern trainer faint. Locche doubled down on his smoking. In fact, it's said that Locche would smoke up to 3 packs a day. While other fighters were pushing their bodies to the limit and following strict diets, Locche seemed to succeed despite his habits. So the question is, how did a chain-smoking, undertrained boxer with a defensive style manage to rise to the top of boxing? Locche turned pro at 19, and his early career results were mixed. In his first 20 fights, he won 13, lost 1, and drew 6. Not exactly the start you'd expect from a future legend. However, from 1961 onwards, Locche went on a tear. He strung together an unbeaten streak of 48 fights, picking up the Argentine lightweight title along the way. But it wasn't just about the wins. It was how he was winning that caught people's attention. Take his fight against former lightweight champion Joe Old Bones Brown in 1963. Brown was a respected veteran with over 100 wins to his name. He made the American look like he was fighting his own shadow. For 10 rounds, Locche stood right in front of Brown, slipping punches, resulting in a shutdown victory that rocketed him up the world's rankings. In 1965, he took on reigning WBA and WBC lightweight champion Ishmael Laguna in a non-title bout. The fight resulted in a highly controversial draw that many thought Locche had won.
Y termina la pelea. Ahí están los dos abrazándose, Laguna saludando al público.
A year later, he faced another world champion, Carlos Ortiz. Once again, Locche's elusive style frustrated his opponent, resulting in another draw. Over the next 2.5 years, Locche continued to rack up an astonishing 29 victories and 1 draw. It seemed he was finally ready for his opportunity to prove himself on the world stage. In December 1968, that opponent came in the form of challenging WBA super lightweight champion Takeshi Fuji in enemy territory, Tokyo, Japan. The Korakuen Hall is packed to the rafters. In one corner stood Fuji, the hometown favorite. In the other, the enigmatic challenger from Argentina, Nicolino Locche. Fuji was no pushover, boasting an 87% knockout ratio and was known for his devastating power. From the opening bell, it was clear this wasn't going to be a typical fight. Locche stood inches away from Fuji, almost daring him to throw a punch. And throw Fuji did. But for every hook, every straight right, every uppercut Fuji launched, Locche had an answer. A slight lean back, a duck, a parry. Fuji might as well have been punching at a ghost. As the rounds ticked by, Fuji's frustration grew. He'd load up huge shots, only to find himself spinning 180 degrees as Locche calmly stepped aside. And every time Fuji missed, Locche was there with a stinging counter. By the 9th round, Fuji was a mess. His face was swollen, blood was flowing, and worst of all, he was exhausted. Locche, on the other hand, looked like he'd just stepped into the ring. As Fuji slumped back to his corner after the 9th, his team had had enough. They threw in the towel, unable to watch their fighter endure any more punishment. In that moment, Nicolino Locche became more than just a clever boxer. He became a world champion. He became El Intocable, the untouchable. And he did it all while barely breaking a sweat. The Tokyo crowd, initially hostile to the foreign challenger, couldn't help but be won over by Locche's incredible display. However, Locche's victory over Fuji wasn't the end of his story. Far from it. He went on to defend his title 6 times over the next 4 years. And true to form, he did it his way. Between rounds, while other fighters were gasping for air and getting instructions from their corners, Locche would be smoking. His corner would drape a towel over his head to conceal it, but there he'd be, puffing away on his cigarette. Despite his unorthodox habits, Locche's reign was impressive. He outclassed former champions like Carlos Hernandez and weathered tough challenges from the likes of Joao Henrique and Adolphe Pruitt. Even a car crash in 1970 couldn't derail him. He was back in the ring just months later defending his title. But time catches up with every fighter, even the untouchable ones. In March 1972, Locche lost his title to Alfonso Frazier. He tried to regain it, but fell short against Antonio Cervantes in 1973. The magic was fading. Locche retired, but like many fighters, couldn't stay away. He returned after a 2.5-year layoff, but at 36, he was a shadow of his former self. After 7 wins against lesser opposition, Locche hung up the gloves for good in 1976. His final record? 117 wins, 4 losses, and 14 draws in 136 fights. But more impressive than the numbers was the way he achieved them. Locche didn't just win fights, he made world-class opponents look foolish. After boxing, Locche's smoking habit caught up with him. He had a triple bypass operation in 1994, but even that couldn't make him quit. Sadly, on September 7, 2005, Nicolino Locche passed away from heart failure. He was 66 years old. In 2003, 2 years before his death, Locche received the ultimate recognition, induction into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. It was a fitting tribute to a man who had redefined what was possible in the ring. He was truly El Intocable, the untouchable. What do you think about Locche's unorthodox style and habits? Could a fighter like him succeed in today's boxing world? Share your thoughts in the comments. The boxing world is full of legendary figures with fascinating stories. If you're hungry for more tales of boxing greatness, why not check out our other videos? Thanks for watching.